All right, Dad, thanks for being interviewed for this project. So we could start off, what is your full name?
Richard Franklin Johnson. I was born December 30th, 1946, here in Mesa at the Mesa Southside Hospital. I'm the second of seven children, second son. My older brother was born just as World War II was starting, and then I'm one of those come home and happy to see my wife and mom and dad who were glad to have me come right after the war had ended. World War II. And so I was raised, went to Mesa High, all the schools here in Mesa. I'm a native of Arizona.
Great. So you were alive during the Vietnam War era. If you would talk just maybe briefly to start about in the 60s when you were in high school, kind of your reaction to and kind of opinion of the war in those early years.
Um, I was raised as a Christian, and I'm a believer in a Heavenly Father, and as a Christian, I believe that we have a relationship with each other as humans on this earth to be kind to each other, and that we should not kill, and however, in the defense of our lives or the defense of our country, then that may be something we would be called upon to do. During the 60s, when I was a child, there were lots of concerns about treating each other humanely. Civil rights was an issue, and I came to feel very strongly that racism has no place here, nor sexism, nor inequalities among people living in this country. And during the Vietnam War, for the first part of it, I was little aware of it. It was a war under a domino theory that this country was involved in its fear of communism, coming from one country to the next country to the next country. And a very small group of soldiers from our country were over there fighting. It was presented much like Korea, that other countries were also going to be helping and involved early. As it went on further, and coming back after volunteering to serve as a missionary for my faith for 2 years in the country of Chile, I came back to a country that was very much involved. And there was a draft of people going into the military, the Army, the other armed services you could volunteer for. And so I came back to wanted to believe I could serve my country by gaining an education. And so if you were a full-time college student, you had what was called a 2S deferment from being drafted. There were friends of mine who were drafted, who weren't going to college, who then were drafted into the Army and served and were serving overseas in Vietnam. I graduated in 1965, and I came back and returned to my education, coming back in 1968 as a full-time student at Mesa Community College and then on to ASU, and then became engaged before I graduated, about 7 months before that, from ASU with my bachelor's degree in political science. And so certainly I was thinking about beginning a family, and if I was to leave overseas and be gone in the military for several years as a draftee, how would that feel? How would I be a good husband and father? Just before I graduated, I was aware of 6-7 months before I graduated that my wife was expecting a child. And I believed that I could serve my country coming from parents whose my father had served in World War II, my uncles on both my mother's side and my dad's side of the family had served in World War II. And so I believed very much in patriotism and serving my country. And I was even in a there was a lottery draft, and I was number 3 in the lottery draft. And so I wasn't going to graduate until January of 1971. Our first child was born March 18th, 1971. I was married June 30th, 1970. And so, pondering about this, I came to the decision that I could best serve my country by going in an Army Reserve or a National Guard unit, or Air Force National Guard unit. I had a brother-in-law who was in the Air National Guard and believed I was still being patriotic to my country. I was aware that there were Army Reserve and National Guard units who had been called up to active duty. I knew that could happen, though less likely than going drafted straight on in with little choice as to what specialty or how I would serve, other than being a soldier, a foot soldier. 11 Bravo was the title. I joined the United States Army Reserve. I was in the 277th Army Reserve Unit out here at Papago Park. 6201 East Oak was the address in Phoenix, and enlisted. And my specialty in this Army Intelligence Unit was to be an interrogator of prisoners of war. I was good at talking with people, speaking with people, and believe those skills which I brought from my high school experience and being a leader in many ways, and talking with people constantly as a missionary for my faith, that those skills would be well used there for my country and for my family. And so I went from graduating in January to 1971 to going off to basic training in March, early March, having pledged and taken a sworn oath to be a member of the Army Reserve, and was gone for about 4 or 5 months in basic and advanced training, and continued to serve in the Army Reserve for the following 10 years. Though my commitment was only for 6, I served an additional 4 years, believing that that was a patriotic thing that I could do, as well as a nice second job to support my family.
During the war, then you commented earlier about kind of your respect for the sanctity of life. What was your, I guess, response to the war then specifically? Were you a supporter of the war? Were you against the war? And how did you kind of voice those opinions?
I did not accept, after my studying the war and studying the history and politics of our country and the world, which I had studied. My bachelor's degree was in political science with a major in history. I did not agree with the fear theory that there was a domino effect, and if we didn't stop the communists and keep them out of Vietnam, then the other countries in Eastern Asia and Japan and all the other countries would be taken over by communism, and then there would be a stepping stone towards coming to our country and ruling our country. The fear portraits in the news was of Premier Khrushchev of Russia hammering his shoe at the United Nations, repeatedly displayed on the news over and over. There was McCarthyism, with a great fear that there were communists here who were pledged to the overthrow of this country, as opposed to a philosophy, political, of how to govern, which communism is. And I didn't agree that this was a necessary war to protect us from communism. I didn't have that, and because I didn't have that belief, I saw the war in Vietnam as a civil war of peoples in the North and peoples of the South looking for supporters to finance their disagreements on how to rule. They'd come from a history of a dynasty, of a kingships and others in that country. So I didn't agree with that philosophy. I didn't believe that we should be over there involved in civil wars. I was aware that civil wars had happened in South American countries, had happened and were continuing to happen in Africa, and that they not too far in the distant past had happened in Southern Europe and other places. And so I opposed to the war. I didn't think that we should be spending our funds and the lives of our citizens, that it wasn't to defend our country as it had been portrayed. And so voiced that with others that I spoke with, and even to the point, as I've discussed with you, of one day wearing a black armband. I worked for the Arizona state government on the block just south of the state capitol with the Department of Economic Security and Unemployment Insurance. Went to my college classes in the morning, and then graduated on the rest of the day. I went to work at the state capitol processing unemployment insurance claims. I wore that little armband with a little piece of black cloth around my arm all day in my classes at the university and at my work at the state government of Arizona. I didn't shout, I didn't go to any marches, but when asked why, I would explain why I believe that.
Okay. A couple final just topics, if you could just share maybe your feelings or opinions regarding the following. First, the anti-war movement and the protests that took place in the 1960s.
The anti-war movement was a peaceful protest. Mahatma Gandhi, Martin Luther King, other protests against the political ideas were pacifist. They were not violent. And I was surprised at the shootings that took place at the State University back in the Midwest. Sadly for those who fired them and those who were killed.
Why did you not join them then in participating in protests and so forth?
There was no violent protest. I participated in this way with others that same day who wore armbands. I was the only one in my office at work. I was a minority at the university, but I believe that I should stand up and express my opinions and thoughts. I believe being a citizen is not a passive responsibility. As a Boy Scout and as a citizen, that I should honor my country by participating and expressing my opinion as a voter and a citizen adult.
Okay. Well, the last three topics are all names, actually. The first is Lyndon B. Johnson. Your opinions of him as a president during the Vietnam era.
I thought he had a lot of things to take care of. He certainly had a massive responsibility for furthering the civil rights and the equality of people in this country. And this war responsibility with commitments inherited by our assassinated President John F. Kennedy, I believe led him to try to carry on the work that that president had begun, which was a reflection of a movement throughout our country of the equality that needed to take place. Lyndon Baines Johnson was certainly a savvy politician, and many may say he was an arm twister and a professional politician. But his statement of not running again for president on his own, which he could have done, his statement of not going forward and more processing the war, even to the use of atomic bombs, which was being advocated in winning that war, I thought was wise. I thought he realized the mistake, that it was a civil war, and helped our country back out of that, as went on and happened with the president that succeeded him.
And the next name is General William Westmoreland.
I thought he came from a time of World War II where he thought we should not be in a war unless we were there to win. Win militarily, win on the ground, win on conquering the geographical territory of the land. I don't know that he was sensitive to the needs and to the people of Vietnam, and never stood back overall on what was best for those as a country and a people. I thought he realized the movement that was about. I don't think he was deaf to the concerns that it was a civil war and not a police war that we needed to wage for the defense of this country. I don't know that he came out of there unsullied. I think his reputation was harmed by his involvement and his processing forward with that war. I think his resignation afterwards and going on was a reflection of that.
And finally, Richard Nixon.
I think Richard Nixon as a president did many things that were inappropriate. However, his running against Kennedy for president, advocating winning the war, I thought was a mistake. I thought, well, it was Goldwater who ran against Kennedy. Let me further that. His coming in afterwards, I think he realized the futility of that. He was involved in the talks in France under his leadership and gradually moving out and that war ceasing. Although I thought his end justified the means in much of his political life, I thought it was appropriate that he helped in getting out of that. I think of him as one who correctly initiated conversations with China as opposed to refusing to talk with them. I think he will be best known for having brought us into unity in the United Nations and trying to use that forum and involving us as part of all the nations in this world, as opposed to seeking some type of domination and unilateral activity because we have the military power and ability to do it.
Thanks, Dad.
You're welcome, Chad. I hope I'm useful to you and those who listen.